You guys, I'm really excited about what I get to talk about today. This message has been swirling for a few months, and I'm going to do everything I can to keep it light. I like to try that way. Here at Glow Church, we are what we call a life-giving church. We like to speak the truth, but we like to speak it in a way that makes you walk away feeling encouraged and empowered like you can do this thing. We don't ever believe that God leads people in a way that makes them feel beat over the head by his word. So I'm going to do everything I can to make you feel super encouraged today. But when things get difficult in my life, after I throw my fits and I withdraw myself and isolate myself and play the passive-aggressive game and all of those things that we as humans like to do, the one thing that really tends to anchor me and get me back on track is I like to zoom out and think about the big picture, which is forever. It's eternity. It's knowing that what's going on right here is not eternal, that it's going to eventually pass, and that truthfully, the time we spend here on earth is far shorter than what we're going to spend the rest of our lives doing when our time here on earth is done. So that's kind of where this message came from. It was just in a place where I was just like, I just need to forget about being so close to what's going on and just zoom out and think about what this whole life thing is really all about. So today, my message is titled, Here Comes the Bride. Okay? What does that have to do with anything? It's going to be good, I promise you. I'm going to get to talk about the greatest love story ever told. And it is not Pastor Matt and I's love story. It's one of the greatest, but this is the of all time greatest. It's the love story between Jesus and his bride. Now, if you don't know that, being part of the church, you are Jesus' bride. It's clear all throughout Scripture, Jesus calls the church, the big C, not just Glow Church, but the big C church, his bride. He loves his bride deeply and more passionately and intimately than you could ever imagine. He is supposed to be our first love because that's who we are to him. No one means more to Jesus than you. No one means more to Jesus than his church. And I'll say this, I think you guys would all agree with me. The church as a whole, I don't think currently is really what Jesus envisioned the church to be like. And I know that's a harsh, deep statement, but it's because it's made of humans, right? He knew that. He's not surprised by it, but the church is in a very broken state. It's very misguided. It's intimidated. If you were here last week, Pastor Mike talked a little bit about this, and I'm going to reiterate some of the points he even made, but the church is intimidated by the manure the world is trying to sell us all the time. And as a result, we've become super ineffective. Super ineffective. Churches are closing. They're dying. People think they're not for today. They've lost their effectiveness and what their initial intention was to do. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. But the big moment in any love story is the wedding, right? It's not the culmination. It's not the beginning, and it's not the end. It's usually, it's like maybe a third of the way through you meet, you fall in love, and then there's this big moment, and then there's the marriage. And there's a lot of time planning the wedding, but a very small amount of time preparing for the marriage. Wouldn't you agree? So just for fun, because I like props, you guys, this is our wedding album. I'm going to show you. Let me find like a really good picture here. You guys can look through this as long as you promise your hands won't be sticky and you don't destroy it. I can't step out of the light, so I'm going to. Cool. Okay, there's lots of cool pictures in there if you want to look at it. This is my wedding dress. I was going to preach in it. But for 21 years, we've been married now, we have eaten far too many cheeseburgers and ice cream sundaes, and the circulation in my arms was cutting off, and I was like, this is not gonna happen. My thought was I'll wear like a dark or a white shirt under it. It'll all be good. No. It's not a pretty sight. But it's still in great shape and it's beautiful. Okay, so anyway, we spend all this time preparing for a wedding. All the flowers, the cake. This is just from Walmart. It's not a fancy wedding cake, but probably you spend hours picking out and sampling your cake, and it has to be the perfect one. And the photographer and all the dress, all of this. So much work preparing for the wedding. I want to read to you something out of Scripture. It's in Matthew 25, verses 1 through 12. If you have the Bible app on your phones, pull it out. If you have a notes app, write some of this down. Taking notes matters because it opens your heart to being a lifelong learner. And you can go back later and say, okay, God, I heard this message. Show me, where on these areas, my heart needs to shift and adjust. So I'm going to read this parable to you, and then we're going to talk a little bit about it. Okay, the parable of the 10 virgins. Now, Jesus is talking to people, mostly Jewish people, and there's a reason he used this as an example, because it was very cultural to them back in the day. He talked in parables a lot, which are stories, and I love them. If you've been here for any length of time, you know how much I love symbolism. What does this represent? I'm always trying to figure out what this represents. So to me, I love a parable like this. There's so much cool stuff to pull out of it. It says, then the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish, thoughtless, silly, and careless, and 5 were wise, farsighted, practical, and sensible. For when the foolish took their lamps, they did not take any extra oil with them. But the wise took flasks of oil along with their lamps. Now while the bridegroom was delayed, and they all began to nod off and fell asleep. But at midnight there was a shout, look, the bridegroom is coming, go out to meet him. Then all those virgins got up and put their lamps in order, trimmed the wicks, added oil to them. But the foolish ones said, give us some of your oil because our lamps are going out. We ran out. We weren't prepared. But the wise replied, no, otherwise there will not be enough for us and you. Go instead to the dealers and buy oil for yourselves. But while they were going away to buy oil, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in with him to the wedding feast, and the door was shut and locked. Later, the others came and said, open the door. And he replied, do I even know who you are? We have no relationship. Therefore, be on alert and ready, for you do not know when the day or the hour of the Son of Man will come. Okay, I'm out of breath. Lacey, can you bring me my water? I forgot to bring it up here. Okay. Just for the sake of some context here, I want to give you a little bit of backstory about ancient Jewish wedding customs and rituals, because this will be a lot cooler if you know what's going on. Okay. Let me say this, though. The bedrock of our Christian faith is made up of some really core happenings. First, it's the garden, right? The beginning of all things, the fall of man, and our need for a Savior. Okay? Then, it's time for the Savior, virgin birth, then the cross, the resurrection, and lastly, the one thing that hasn't happened yet is the second coming of Jesus. And that's going to be exciting, whether you meet him at the end of your life or you're still here when he comes back for everyone. We get to be face to face with him one day. And that's what this parable is talking about. So in ancient Jewish weddings, whether the marriage was arranged or whatever, there was a betrothal time, right? So a groom would leave his house, his father's house, okay, and he would go to pay the dowry price or the betrothal price for his bride, okay? Just like Jesus, I'm giving you the symbols as I go, like real easy and quick because I don't have a lot of time. Just like Jesus paid the price for us, okay? So he would go and pay the price, And then the preparations would begin. So he would leave where the bride was and go back to his father's estate. And he would begin to prepare an estate or a place on his father's estate for him and his bride. That's what Jesus is doing right now. He was here and he ascended and he went to heaven and he's off preparing a place for you. Okay? Like I said, Jesus always used something relevant to help people understand. So then, at an unknown time, it was usually like about a year or something like that, he would be ready. Once he got all the preparations ready, he would come back for his bride. But here's the thing. She didn't know when he was coming. So, picture this. Now, I know they're not modern times, but I've seen enough to know that probably wedding attire back then was not still too comfortable. So the bride would know he's coming sometime soon, and usually this would happen in the middle of the night, okay? And then this whole feast would begin. She had to go to bed every night ready. And all her bridesmaids had to go to bed every night ready. And there wasn't electricity, so they had to have lamps with oil, and they would go to bed and like, is he gonna come? Like they knew kind of when he was coming, but not for sure the day, okay? Not for sure the day, just kind of like, we're getting close, so I better be ready. Okay, so then he would come, and he would have guys with him, and they would play trumpets. And they would create this parade down the street to announce, I'm coming for my bride, I'm coming for my bride. And then the bride would get up and light her lamp, and they would go on this procession, and they would go to his father's house. They would consummate the marriage, and then there would be 7 days of celebration after that. Okay? So you can kind of see how this is parallel to what we're expecting. So who are all the people in the story, and what do they represent, and what does this have anything to do with me right now? Cool, let me tell you. I'm glad you asked, right? Okay. Jesus represents the groom, right? We are his bride. Us and the 10 virgins all represent the church and the people inside and outside of the church. That's who they are in this story. And then the wedding is when Jesus returns to grab his bride and take her to be with him for eternity, because we know it's not going to be pretty. It's already not pretty here on earth, but it's going to get not prettier. So we get to be in heaven forever with him, and it's really awesome. So going back to what I said at the beginning, how do we prepare for that moment? And why does it even matter to us? Why would I even care? What does this have to do with anything? Here's why. Because, like I said, we're going to spend a lot more time on the other side of eternity. Here on earth, our life is just a vapor. It's 70, 80, 90, 100, 120 years at the most. And in the span of time, that's like that. But you see, Jesus gave us the Great Commission right before he left as a mandate, because they want as many of their children to be in heaven as possible. It's a mandate to populate heaven as much as we can. And if we think we're the only ones that matter if we get there, we're wrong. He wants us to take as many people as we can with him. And those 10 bridesmaids or virgins in the story represent 50% of them who were ready and who were wise and who were thinking about it and who were prepared. And the other 50% represent people who thought it wasn't important right now, or it wasn't relevant, or that they had more time. And then all of a sudden, time was up. And he was like, but I don't remember you. You weren't in the procession. You weren't walking down the street with me. You weren't walking with me all the time. I don't know you. So this urgency feeling of how can we be prepared? How can we become the church that he always envisioned? And I have a few points that I just want to talk through with you. First of all, point number one, and the most important one, is that he is our first love. Always, always, always going back to our first love. That's one of his names. There's like over 300 names, 365 names, one for every day of God. One of them is that he's our first love. That means relationship, communion, communication. And let me say this, I'm talking about Jesus in the church, but use this as free marriage advice. Take it. Because the same things apply. Our first love, the foundation of all, our firm foundation, is our relationship, the time we spend together in communication for him. And I'll just say this, sitting in a church building, in a chair, doesn't make me any more a follower of Jesus than sitting in a garage makes me a car. There's a song that we really like. I don't think we've ever sung it here, but it's called Come Again. And there's musical stuff, a bridge or some term that doesn't mean the main part, that says, it's not a building you want to fill, it's my heart. This empty space is what you wanted all along. That's what Jesus is after. If every person in this building made room for him, he's more concerned with that than any empty seat that's there. I believe he wants to fill it with all kinds of people who will open their heart to him, obviously. But he's more after your heart than just populating churches full of people. So the condition of our heart, our first love. You guys, he loves us so much. His love is a love like no human love could ever fill you. You could never experience. It's a perfect love. It's an overwhelming love. It's a love that if we fully felt it the way he could lavish it on us, our human flesh could not even handle it. Number two, faithfulness. Everyone say this with me. Be a stayer. S-T-A-Y-E-R. Be a stayer. So, in the times of 2022 and deconstruction and canceling and all the things, it's so much easier. And when I say this, please understand, I'm not talking about extremely unhealthy or abusive relationships or anything like that, okay? But in everyday relationships, when it's just a matter of being offended or our feelings getting hurt or things are hard, be a stayer. Be a stayer. It's so easy to uproot and say, well, I'm not getting my needs met anymore, and I don't like what they do, and in the sense of the church, the worship or the teaching or the kids or the whatever, and I just uproot and I just keep going around and never plant myself. You guys, faithfulness is not a part of our culture in marriage or in the church. People are walking away right and left every time something gets hard. God has called us, I believe every person in this room who calls Glow Church your home, he's called you to this family. And families work through things when it gets hard. They don't just cancel. Same in your relationships. Stay. Once again, not abusive, not extremely unhealthy. That's not what I'm talking about. Not unfaithfulness. We're not talking about that. What I'm saying is, don't give up on people in their darkest hour. Be a stayer. Be a stayer. Develop what it takes to put forth the work. Because that's when God starts to do beauty from ashes and miracles start occurring. Because you opened your heart and surrendered and you didn't walk away. Number 3, serving or on mission. The number one thing in God's heart is people. It's his children. And like we were talking about, we want to take as many with us as possible. One of the greatest things we can do is live our lives outside ourselves, to be a light, to glow, to show the love of Jesus to all the people who are out there broken and hurting and walking through the darkest moments of their life, feeling like they have no hope. And God has put purpose and gifts and talents inside every person, but they're not just there for you. He wants you to enjoy them and use them to provide for your family and do all of these things. But we're missing the greater purpose if we keep that only for our benefit. Right? Like, for example, Andrew, drumming. It's a great example. When he's here playing and he's doing it for God, the gift God has placed inside of him, it's used for reaching people for eternity. If Andrew just sat in his basement and drummed all day, and it was a beautiful gift to his wife or someone, I'm sure, with her headphones on trying to watch her show or something. I wish he would just stop. Whatever God's placed inside you, how he's uniquely created to, never let it just be for you. Find a way, whether it's in God's house, please, in God's house, we can use your gifts to reach people in incredible ways, even in the simplest of things. Like Pat, if you have a beautiful smile like Pat that lights up a room and you just stand there and serve coffee and come early and make the coffee and smile at people and serve it, like that's using what God put inside of you for eternity. If you're struggling with purpose in your life, just show up and offer to serve. Just do something for someone other than yourself, and you'll instantly be filled with purpose. Okay, point number 4. Find out what's valuable to him and make it valuable to me. Okay, Mom, I'm going to use you as an example. Okay, you guys, these are my parents over here on the corner. Everyone give them a big hand clap. They're the best. They're the best. There's just no other word than the best. Give them a hug on your way out. Make sure we flood them with hugs. So my dad is a farmer, okay? He's at least a second, third, were there farmers before Grandpa Art? 4th generation farmer. Still lives on the same land that he was raised on, have built their beautiful dream homes on it, farming, okay? Anyone in here raised anywhere near or by farmers understand a little bit about that? Okay. All right. So, if my mom absolutely detested farming, she hated everything about it, do you think they're going to be able to walk together for long? Now, okay, hating something or not, whatever, is different than like when it's harvest time and the hours are long and like, you know. Okay, if I hated the church, like, or was really in, let's just not say hate, that's a strong word. What about if I was just indifferent about it? Cool, Pastor Matt. You go do the church thing. I don't really care one way or another. And he was always investing in his passion. And I had absolutely no care to anything that he was passionate about or cared about. Do you think we're going to be able to walk together for long? Do you think eventually we're going to have to part ways? Because you can't, there's a scripture that says, how can two walk together unless they agree? So listen, if I'm never concerned with what God is concerned about, are we ever going to be able to intimately walk close together? Or is God just going to be some distant, like, majestic being that created everything but doesn't relate to me and I can't turn to in my darkest hour and I'm never filled with purpose because he's the one who created me and knows the way to my heart? We have to know what's valuable to God and begin to pursue it as if it's valuable to us. And that's where transformation occurs, and he begins to change our heart, and it truly does. It truly does become valuable. And for the record, both Pastor Matt and I feel very strongly called to the church. It's not just him. I'm not just the pastor's wife. He plays very specific things inside me as well, so you don't ever have to worry about that. Just so you all know. Okay. And that our priorities are in order because God's priorities, what matters to him, become what matter most to us. Not that other things don't matter, but it's just what matters most is important. Okay, number 5. My life reflects him. I represent him in everything I do. So let this one sink in for a minute. Picture yourself throughout your week, throughout your month, as you're going about your business, and imagine the fact that everything you do, whether other people see it or not, represent him. What you're posting on social media, what you say to the people at work, how you treat your husband, how you treat your wife, how you talk to your kids. Bless you. The character that I walk with, the fruits of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Everything I do represents him. Now, that's not a unattainable, like I have to be perfect all the time. He's a good God, and he's full of grace and mercy, and he does not expect perfection from his children. So if you've ever been worried that you're not good enough for him, let me free you from that right now. All he wants is pursuit. He wants a person with a heart after him, like David, called a man after God's own heart, yet he committed murder, adultery, lying, like he was insecure, intimidated, all kinds of things, yet he was still a man after God's own heart. He doesn't demand perfection, but if we're in pursuit of him, we're going to have what it takes to make choices in line with the character that represents him well. And on that point, with weddings, let the church not be a bridezilla. You guys ever seen that show? There are some bridezillas here that have walked through this place. Let me tell you, we've been in the room when things change. What do I mean by that? Well, demanding that everything is my way all the time. That's a bridezilla, or a mom of the bridezilla. Experience those two, okay? Demanding that everything be perfect in our way all the time is what has caused so many people to turn and walk away out the doors of the church and never come back. Because they don't feel called to be a part of an imperfect family of people that's walking by grace, pursuing God together. They're just there to sit in the seats and have their needs met. Is the kids' ministry to my liking? Is the music to my, is it, you know what I'm saying? Are the people perfect in the way that they talk to me and treat me? When we walk through the doors of the church, we should reflect the image of God in every way possible and show grace and mercy and kindness and encouragement and allowance and pray with people and walk through dark times with people. It's the most imperfect place on earth, but it's a fishbowl that everyone is constantly judging and evaluating. And the last point is number 6, I have truth, not manure. And Pastor Mike was talking about that. You guys, God's not a custom store. I'm trying to think of an example. Everything's custom now. Like you can fill out a survey online and design skincare or hair products that's just for you, formulated specifically for you, or design your custom. Everything's custom. My meal plan that I do online for my shop, it's custom. Okay, God's not a custom-made God. We don't get to pick and choose the things that work for us and leave the ones aside that don't. Okay? He's not a, so this whole thing that Pastor Mike was talking about last week with the manure and truth is we have to make sure, and I'm holding up my phone, I don't have my paper Bible. These are times when a paper Bible comes in handy preaching. Just know this is my Bible I'm holding up right now, okay? It's truth according to this. And by this, I don't mean the interwebs or Facebook or Snapchat or Be Real or whatever. It's not truth according to that. It's not truth according to the election coming up. It's not truth according to, you name it. It's truth according to this. So if we're ever in doubt what God's heart is on something, remember, we're talking about a bride who's ready for Jesus. A church who reflects the image of God well. A church who is drawing in as many people as they can so that broken lives can be healed and we can all together spend eternity forever with him. And not one apart from him when we had the chance. When there was that person who was in their darkest hour and we were just indifferent or annoyed. There's a lot of good things we can do on this earth with great intentions. But if it was only that mattered for our eternity with God, then the cross wouldn't have been necessary. All of us fall short. And he's the answer, and he's more simple than the world makes him to be. He's not an unattainable, he's not an unattainable God who wants to rain down fire on you and wait for you to mess up and call you out. He took on all of the weight and the pain and the burden that our sin did on himself, having never messed up in his life, just to make a way for us to be able to one day sit at the feet of our Abba Father. He loves you and cares about you intimately.